Path to Paradise is funded in part by the Burnham Foundation and by Solomon Smith Barney and Public Financial Management Incorporated.
Any vibrant community or city, especially one the size of San Diego in this country, with our society, lifestyle, needs to have a strong central post, a strong central area. It's much like a wheel needs a strong axis, a strong axle. And that's what downtown represents. And then the spokes that go out into the community are all tied into downtown.
The San Diego region is a vast collection of 18 municipalities, each with its own major center, and all in the orbit of what we recognize as downtown. Urban planners and civic leaders have long celebrated downtown as the heart of the region. The heart is healthy now, so healthy that developers are lining up to build signature projects, from a baseball park and an expanded convention center to a waterfront pedestrian promenade and a sky tower overlooking San Diego. These are good times for downtown, but it hasn't always been that way.
Downtown was unworthy of San Diego. I used to invite visitors to the city to the top of one of the few tall buildings that then existed. And I would simply, without leading the witness, ask them to look south and look west. Look towards the water, and then tell me what you think. Almost inevitably, if these were people who were sophisticated about real estate development, they'd say, my God, this is some of the most underutilized and potentially valuable urban real estate in North America. Because as you look down, it was perfectly obvious. You were looking at grade-level parking lots, low-level buildings. You were looking at old property that had become dilapidated. You were looking at drayage sheds that were a half century out of date, a total anachronism. And you were looking down Broadway at tattoo parlors. And it looked like what it was, kind of a sleepy Liberty town, and it was not attractive, and it was not attracting real investment, and it wasn't providing housing, it wasn't providing jobs, it wasn't providing any kind of return on investment. There were people who had long since made an investment, who were spending next to nothing, keeping up the property. They had bought it, they had paid off the mortgage, they had allowed it to deteriorate. It was generating little in the way of taxes and a lot in the way of problems. Mostly it was an ignored potential opportunity. And to put it in a slightly poetic, but I think accurate turn of phrase, it was the decaying heart of an otherwise vibrant community.
The waterfront downtown that Alonzo Horton built in the late 1800s and that thrived through the first part of this century fell into disrepair after World War II.
It was very blighted. You have to look back on our history and realize that we really were a Navy town, that Congressman Kettner had, in the late 20s and 30s, had brought the Navy to town, and that the Navy was a little bit different than perhaps it is today, a little less politically correct, if you will. And I think San Diego was a liberty town, and all of downtown San Diego, especially South Broadway, had developed into locker clubs and things of that nature, adult entertainment. That, either because of that situation or because of the suburbs had cheaper land, what you had seen was most of the retail began to leave downtown, and it was very desolate.
The flight to the suburbs left downtown virtually void of new blood. And when this building, which housed the city and county government offices, got too crowded, the city had a decision to make.
The natural thing that was first proposed was that they would go just up the street on Cedar Street. Cedar Street going west runs into the county administration building, dead ends at Pacific Highway. So the thought was they would make a Cedar Street mall, which would be government offices, and that would be where the city would go.
The concept of a Cedar Street Mall came from John Nolan, the renowned urban planner whose designs for San Diego had become the official plan in the 1920s. But downtown property owners in the 1960s had another idea.
Joe Jessup Sr., Ewart Goodwin, Anderson Borthwick, Ed Hall, and several others got together and said, look, we need to rebuild downtown San Diego. Wouldn't it be a good incentive, wouldn't it be a good catalyst if we could get the city administration offices to come downtown, and then we'd gather more businesses around it, and that would be the spark to start developing downtown San Diego again after World War II. So they went around and literally passed the hat. And at that point in time, they came up with something, as I recall, in the order of $1.5 million of private donations as an incentive to hand to the city and say, if you'll come downtown and occupy these blocks, we will help buy it for you. We will help pay for it. And that was what happened, and that is the city bought in on that. City government at that time decided to come down and build what is the current City Hall and complex community concourse for the city.
The San Diego Civic Center opened in 1965, but the grand event did not prove to be the desired catalyst for redevelopment.
No, it really didn't happen. It produced a civic center that was useful, but not by itself sufficient to generate the kind of urban rebirth that was necessary. There were some new buildings built, but you still had an awful lot of downtown that was frankly an eyesore and totally unproductive. Unproductive in terms of being an adequate tax base and unproductive of employment.
The group of business leaders who brought City Hall to downtown organized themselves into San Diegans, Inc., a nonprofit aimed at promoting downtown development. They worked closely with Pete Wilson, the new mayor, whose campaign promises echoed their agenda.
Well, I was convinced that for the entire community to be as healthy as it could and should be, we had to do something to dramatically revitalize the downtown. And I was also convinced that while it would not be easy, it in many respects represented an enormous opportunity that to some with vision would prove, if not irresistible, at least a highly attractive risk well worth taking. And I thought that if, I knew that no one as an investor wanted to be the bold and lonely pioneer. You don't suddenly sink a lot of money into an area, into a neighborhood in which yours is the only prospering, forward-looking venture. It's too risky. You have to have at least some assurance that you're going to have some company. And you really have to have some assurance that the local government intends to provide some kind of basis for support. What that translated to in my vision for what the city could become was the necessity for the city to undertake what in fact had already been undertaken in a very modest way, and it was largely stalled. And that was the redevelopment of the core, of the downtown.
One of my proudest accomplishments with San Diegans, Inc. was the fact that I chaired a committee to help the city determine how best to do redevelopment from a government standpoint. In San Diego in those years, being a very conservative community, Redevelopment with government tax funds was not a very popular notion in those days. People felt that they should be able to do these things on their own. But when you're looking at a large mass of property to develop and or redevelop for the benefit of government as well as the people in the immediate area, then you have to have government assistance to do it.
CCDC, the Center City Development Corporation, was an idea that came to me when I watched my colleagues on the City Council attempt to deal with some very complex problems. And I don't say this in a deprecating way at all. They were good people. They were good citizens. They were businessmen and women, small businessmen and women. They were not sophisticated about real estate development. And what we needed were people who had sufficient sophistication so that they could, in turn, serve as the board for the redevelopment. What we had started with, like most other cities, was the City Council sitting as a redevelopment agency. It became obvious to me that that really wasn't going to work very well. It wasn't working because the members of the City Council, despite their good intentions, didn't have either the background or the time to devote to a very demanding project. So what we did was to create a nonprofit and to empower it with delegated powers from the city, from the redevelopment agency.
The CCDC, by definition, was chartered for the development of the downtown core. Max Schmidt, who had already spent 2 decades in city planning, joined the CCDC in 1977.
The mood among city planners was probably skeptical. They, I don't believe, felt that redevelopment could occur or would occur. I felt good about it because I had been a part of the development of the Center City Community Plan. I had seen what other cities had done in terms of redevelopment. I was anxious to be involved in something happening as contrasted to writing about what should happen. And so I feel the planners were, well, maybe it'll happen. The City Council, in my view, wasn't always supportive. The most supportive individual and the one that provided the greatest direction was, of course, Pete Wilson.
The whole idea of redevelopment was alien to a number of people who were sort of free market purists. And I, ironically, tend to that philosophy myself, but it's tempered by the realism, by the pragmatic understanding that when you have seen a very serious decline in the value of real property, when it's become, in the language of the State Redevelopment Act, blighted, and genuinely blighted, legitimately so, not a trumped-up description, when it is really slum, then that is exactly why the Act was placed on the books, so that you didn't have to wait for 75 years for someone to come in and buy it for a song when it had deteriorated to the point where it was generating major problems and almost no tax revenue. That was the situation that we found. It could legitimately be defined as blighted, and therefore it afforded us the opportunity to invoke the Act and to make use of it, and that is what we did.
Among the first assignments, redevelop the area known as Horton Plaza just south of Broadway. Named for Alonzo Horton, the plaza itself was created as a gathering place, but a century later it evolved into the symbol of what had to change.
I think downtown in the mid-'70s and before was an embarrassment to all San Diegans. I don't think anybody ever came down here, and I don't think that, I think probably early in the 60s it stopped being the place you came. I grew up here in the late 40s. It was the place you came to on Sunday afternoons to come to the Grant and have lunch and to go to the plaza. And when I was in high school, if you wanted to see a first-run movie, this is where you came to see the movies. And almost all the sports events, we didn't have a professional football team. All the sports events were at the San Diego Stadium at Balboa Stadium. You came out here to watch the the high school games, and then you also came out to watch the Chargers when they first arrived, and you come over to town. But then it seemed to deteriorate. People moved out to Mission Valley and moved out to other locations, and in the 70s nobody was coming down here.
That became the challenge, finding the person who could build the project that would bring downtown back to life.
The one who really wanted to do it was Ernie Hahn, which was one of the best things that ever happened to San Diego. Ernie Hahn, in my judgment, was one of the best things that ever happened to that city. He was a complete gentleman. He had the patience of a saint. He sat through abuse that I would not have tolerated had I been in his position.
Ernie Hahn had made his mark by developing suburban shopping malls.
He had come seeking approval for yet another that subsequently became University Town Center, which I think is very much an asset. I thought then that the market certainly justified it, but I spoke to him very seriously about doing something downtown.
He pounced upon the idea that in order to redevelop downtown San Diego, the first ingredient that we had to have was, to make it successful, would be a 24-hour living city where people live downtown in apartments and condos and homes. But you couldn't attract those people to live downtown unless they had the services, the retail services, shopping, groceries, whatever. And so he proposed that the primary catalyst and the starting point for all of this would be a midtown shopping center to replace the merchants that have been drawn out of downtown San Diego over the years, ironically, by some of his shopping centers in Mission Valley and South Bay and UTC and so on and so forth.
What we wanted to see has come to pass, but it really began with the commitment of a very successful retailer to make a go, not of what he had been doing, but to convert these regional or sub-regional shopping centers that had been horizontal with acres of parking around them into 11 acres vertically in the heart of a downtown.
John Gilchrist worked for the Hahn Company for more than 30 years, the last 15 as its president. He talks here of the relationship between his boss and the mayor.
You had two people that were excellent in their given fields and professions, and I think there was a common denominator, which was, how do we do something that is in fact right for the community? And when you take on a project and you truly have a public-private partnership, which downtown San Diego involved, you really have to have two fairly dynamic people, one driving the public sector and one driving the private sector. And I think Ernie and Mayor Wilson fit that role, and I think going through the battles and the scars of, well, gee, does it make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. If misery loves company, there was a lot of misery along the way, but the two would match each other in vision and tenacity, and as a consequence, I think there was a long-standing relationship, a very friendly one that was established.
I said there are a number of factors that converge here, it seems to me, to offer us a tremendous opportunity. We are a border city, and if we make it easy to travel from the border to the downtown, I think we will have a great amount of shopping potential. That's what you do, Ernie. You're a retail developer. You have the confidence of the major retailers. You can get the anchor stores, the big department stores, and all the specialty shops. They trust your judgment. If we make it easy to come, and if we offer the kind of quality product that you offer, if we combine with that recreational opportunities, the restaurants, the movie theaters, the legitimate theater, if we make it fun, then I think all these things then can converge.
Hahn agreed, but his employees were skeptical.
The staff reaction, and myself included in that, said, well, that's fine, Ernie, and you know, you and Pete keep talking about this thing, And we, meanwhile, continued to work on a lot of the other projects that we had on board, because I think we felt that when the two of them were around each other, it became somewhat infectious, and they would in fact talk about the vision and talk about what could happen. But then, frankly, some of us weren't sure that there was a practical base to some of that. So I think we, for a long time, didn't ignore it, because you couldn't ignore something that Ernie wanted to do, and you couldn't ignore something that the mayor wanted to do. But I think for a while there was maybe a feeling that maybe the thing would die of its own lack of momentum, and let's keep doing other things that we're doing.
Hahn prevailed and directed the staff to find out what might entice potential tenants to set up shop.
We, along with the city, came up with conceptual plans that said, well, gee, if you could get the Navy off of Navy Field, could you in fact put in a marina? And if you had marina with boats, wouldn't that be a great backdrop to have hotels? And if you had hotels downtown and a marina, isn't this a great place for a convention center? And while the convention center is now located in a little different place, at that time it was going to be on the north Embarcadero. But how do you start adding these other ingredients that then allowed us to turn to the retailers and say, you did make the right decision when you left downtown, but now is the right time to change that decision, because you have housing, because you have transit, because you have the convention center, because you have convention hotels, and we now have visitors, and 30 to 50% of your business can be done by visitors and conventioneers. So if in fact the city could pull off some of those things, then we felt we could go back to the major retailers and convince them to come back downtown.
The mayor had some leverage with home builders who needed support for projects elsewhere, such as Carmel Valley.
I urged both George Pardee and Nate Chappelle to engage in what turned out to be the first housing in downtown in a long time, apart from senior housing. And they were, I think, and it took some courage on their part to do it. And we, I think, assisted in that. I don't want you to think that we extorted this. We didn't. But we certainly did encourage it very strongly.
To Pete's credit, and to the credit of the council, and CCDC and San Diego Zinc and all the other people involved at the time, they were able to, in fact, come back and say to us, okay, you want a transit, we have transit. You want some commitment on housing, here's what Pardee's willing to do downtown. You need some ideas on hotels and marina, here's what the Corps of Engineers is willing to do. And I think at that point in time, it was turned on us and said, okay, this is what you said you had to get the retailers, now let's figure out how you get the retailers.
The downtown retail center was, of course, Horton Plaza.
The criticism that surfaced almost immediately when Hahn proposed the shopping center was, it's a big box, it's just dropped in downtown San Diego, it will destroy the character and the amenity, say, of the gas lamp, which was just beginning to come alive at the time. He had to convince, the city council, not the mayor, but the city council, that redevelopment should go forward.
It was not inviting. It was Fortress America. It didn't have sufficient access. It was sort of forbidding. It was not inviting. There wasn't sufficient access. It needed to be opened up.
That's when we brought John Jurdy in, and I remember the day when Ernie called him and said, John, you've talked to us about hill towns and Italy and Siena and how retail needs to, in fact, respond to creating people places, and I guess this is the time we need it.
And it was an intriguing proposition for John Jurdy, because he took the opportunity in redesigning it to produce something that he thought was consistent with the wonderful Mediterranean colors and different styles of architecture all around it. I must say he saw things that not many others saw. That is the aesthetic vision of a great architect.
So his idea was was a whimsical Italian hill town. He wanted to put asphalt paving down initially in the mall areas, and we told him that the bubble gum would stick, so we went with black concrete. But that was meant to be streets. That each one of the department stores, in John's mind, department stores always ruled the retail world. So in the old days, everybody had a tower that were the medieval lords, and so each one of the department stores had a tower, which indicated their prominence in life. He took the 3 levels of the center and actually got a juxtaposition where it looks like 5, but it's really 3, but you're not looking directly across. Recreated, there were 2 historic buildings, the Knights of Pythias building and the Bradley building, that were out in front that we had to tear down, but recreated architecturally those buildings, so it started to feel like something had been there for a long time, tied it into the Balboa. So I think we went from a rather prosaic, suburban, yet innovative idea in our mind to probably something that had never been done, and I'm not sure it's been done since, in the regional shopping center business, which is something that's as wild and crazy as Horton is today.
The gas lamp quarter was almost totally private development, redevelopment. And that was the other confidence that I had, that if there were just the clear indication of public interest and some public commitment by the city government in terms of this initial project, it would spur all kinds of private redevelopment all around it. And that's exactly what happened.
Pete Wilson left for the United States Senate in 1983, just as the construction boom exploded downtown. Wilson's successors oversaw a glut of new commercial projects, building what proved to be too much, too soon.
I think the biggest thing we learned was that commercial real estate, when you get down to the bottom line of what drives commercial real estate, is demand. And I think in the 80s we had a philosophy that if we build, they will come.
Real estate recessions come from the fact, not entirely, but mainly they come from the fact that we have overbuilt product. We built too many office buildings without enough tenants, too many condominiums, too many houses, too much retail space, whatever it is. And we've done it because the real estate market has been going up like this, and we tend to, we being developers, we being lenders, we being whatever is part of the industry, haven't had enough restraint. Thinking that the real estate market is going to continue going up forever. It never has, and it never will. Real estate is a cyclical business.
With the debacle of the savings and loans, the bailout from the Resolution Trust Corporation, all those things juxtaposed with a very poor economy spelled very difficult times for the commercial real estate industry. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen that change dramatically. The economy obviously has come back in all sectors throughout the country, and specifically here in Southern California and San Diego. And then when you layer that against the fact that not much has been built over the last 5 or 6 years in proportion to what was built in the late 80s, the dynamics for a very strong real estate market have been very, very good.
In the marina housing, we've got 9 blocks that have really sat blighted for 25 years. Now we're in a position to begin to develop those. Those are going to produce over 2,500 residential units downtown. In the Center City East area, we've got, well, along Broadway, we've got hotels coming along. I think we've got 4 small hotels. We have 3 major hotels. The Marriott's going to add a tower, the Hyatt's going to add a tower, and we just saw recently that Le Méridien is coming back into the gas lamp area. So we've got all of that kind of stuff coming on. And of course, that doesn't even address the ballpark, which is going to be surrounded by 850 hotel rooms, which I think at the present time they plan for 3 different hotels to be down there. Another 800,000 square feet of office space, and then 150,000 of retail are surrounding the ballpark. So we've done $2 billion worth of redevelopment in downtown over the first 25 years. We now have $3.5 billion in the pipeline that we think will bring on in the next 5 years. That's how much growth we've had in just since the recession ended.
The ballpark. This is the baseball stadium and redevelopment project that voters approved last November. Downtown boosters see this as the next catalyst.
The ballpark is a sequel to what Horton Plaza started. It's a vision, and people continued on with that vision. It's going to be a fun place to be. If it does anything like the ballparks that I've seen, and I've had the opportunity to go to a few of them, it's going to be a gathering place. People like to be around people. We like that. That's why we love the gas lamp so much. It's a gathering of people. They love it. And the Ballpark District is going to do that. Not only will they gather at the ballpark to go to baseball games, but that amenity is provide a tremendous amount more. Because we have the weather that we do, we can have concerts and a variety of other things. And then we have all of the amenities around it, the restaurants, the potential retail, and then living.
To some, Padres owner John Moores could be the next Ernie Hahn.
Again, of course, what happened was that you have a private investor who's willing to put up a large amount of money for the ballpark. So Mr. Moores came forward. He said that he'd put the money up. He was able to devise a plan. And frankly, while Mr. Moores is putting up what seems to be less than the city is putting up for the ballpark, he has assumed the responsibility to put up $425 million worth of development. You follow that development, both the TOT and the sales tax and the other property taxes it's going to bring in, and it pays the city's portion of the ballpark.
Money that the city puts into the ballpark, the $260-some million, will come from issuing bonds. Now those bonds have to be repaid. How are they going to be repaid? They're going to be repaid by tax increment that comes off of the building of office buildings and retail space, plus the additional transit occupancy tax that comes off the additional 850 hotel rooms. Those are not in place today. Somebody has to put them in place. And then when they're in place, the tax revenues from those sources, new tax revenues from those sources, will go to pay the bonds.
That's the plan, as spelled out in the Memorandum of Understanding between the city and the San Diego Padres. Moores must provide sufficient assurances that he can bring the hotel, retail, and commercial developers needed to build this ballpark district by April 1st. What will count as sufficient is not clear. The CCDC wants more details than the Padres are expected to offer. One project well past the planning stage is the expansion of the Downtown Convention Center, as seen here in clips from this promotional video.
We welcome you to the expanded San Diego Convention Center, conceived, designed, and constructed to provide the ultimate showcase for world-class gatherings. Situated on the sparkling bayfront, in the heart of a vibrant downtown, the West Coast Ultimate Convention Facility approaches completion. A state-of-the-art combination of foresight and flexibility, centrally located in a pristine San Diego setting. Its exquisite beauty lies not just in location, but in its functionality. The innovative integrated structure of the expanded convention center exceeds 1.1 million square feet, providing mutually supporting layers of flow, maximizing access throughout an expansive, exciting environment. In every phase of design, sheer elegance coexists in perfect harmony with enhanced functionality. A setting ideal for welcoming groups of any size. Special attention has been paid to ensure that the new space will flow seamlessly from the existing infrastructure. The new center will boast over 525,000 square feet of contiguous exhibit space, more than doubling its previous size. One exhibit hall can become as many as 7 halls, with convenient loading dock access. Outside the center, a lowered harbor drive accelerates traffic flow in and out of the facility. Passenger cars, buses, and pedestrian traffic will flow seamlessly, while truck access to the loading docks is efficient and effortless. The magnificent grand staircase, accented by a luminous arc, leads you to spectacular bayside vistas.
But it's the ability to see those vistas that worries Max Schmidt.
If you can get to the other side, there's a lot of access because there's a handsome promenade along its entire frontage. But that promenade serves the area immediately adjacent to it. The kind of access that I'm talking about is the visual and physical access which you're aware of from a distance, and not the kind of access which is there when you're on site. And so you drive down Harbor Drive, if you are aware that there is this great promenade on the other side of the convention center, you know, I would be surprised. You can walk up to the edge of Harbor Drive and everything from 8th Avenue to Kettner Boulevard is either going to be convention center or hotel complex. And individually, you know, that's okay, but collectively, you know, as the whole, it creates, in my view, you know, a barrier between the downtown and the waterfront. And well, people will say, hey, what's the big deal? We've got all of that area between G Street and Grape, you know, which is relatively open, except that, you know, there is now a North Embarcadero plan, and there is some development potential there, and the same pressure for development will exist on that site as exists on the Convention Center Hotel Complex site. And my concern there again is that we may, if we're not careful, wall off the remaining part of the waterfront.
The North Embarcadero has been described as the front porch of San Diego. But in recent years, it has become more of a coastal thoroughfare, and that bothered Mike McDade.
I spend a lot of time as a port commissioner on the waterfront, and as you walk that area, you're struck with the fact that the area known as the North Embarcadero, which is basically from Market Street to Grape Street, while it's a prime piece of real estate, right now, if you had to characterize its predominant characteristic, it's parking lots. And when you look at that and you look at the beautiful ocean and bay nearby, you begin to realize it's a tremendous waste. When you look from the water side across the North Embarcadero toward the city, you realize that the core city has grown up and is probably in the 1990s, and the actual waterfront at that particular location is still probably back in the 1950s or 60s.
And so, in 1997, McDade called on the city, the county, the Navy, and the CCDC to join the Port Commission in developing the North Embarcadero Visionary Plan.
It's sort of rooted in some of John Nolan's ideas of the past. He had envisioned, as we've seen to be the reality in San Diego, that south of 8th Street would be the more commercial industrial area, and then between 8th Street and the area up to the airport, he envisioned, long before any of us came along, the idea that that could really become an important point for governmental buildings, such as the county building, which is the result of his foresight, a green belt, an entertainment center, and a place really that all of San Diego could be very proud of. And so what we're attempting to do in this plan is pretty much to complete that vision. At the foot of Broadway, at Broadway Pier, there's been a dream for a long time of having a park space down there, something that really recognizes the fact that Broadway is our symbolic Main Street. And under this plan, almost a 5-acre park will be created for that purpose. Likewise, in front of the county administration building, which is a wonderful symbol on the waterfront, we'll also have another open space and green space there that will be amenable for all type of activities. And then the two of those particular open space nodes will be linked together by pulling parking and other activities away from the waterfront and really creating a 100-foot esplanade along the waterfront that will be people active. It will be something that families can come and stroll and picnic in. We hope it will attract commercial enterprises around it that will vitalize it, be a home for entertainment, and that's one concept. If the cruise ship terminal is either maintained or expanded, as we think, at that location, or if that site is given over to other type of commercial development, we think that'll be a tremendous draw to the North Embarcadero. An additional thing that I think will be very exciting is the creation of a new pier at Grape Street, where right now there's the rotting remains of what was once a great fishing industry and piers that aren't usable. And we're talking about tearing those out and putting a hook-shaped pier out into the water that will become a place open for the people to go out on and view back across at the city. And additionally, it'll be a docking linkage for people in the boating community from up and down the West Coast to come in and be able to stop on a short-term basis and visit all that San Diego has to offer.
They talk about creating a pedestrian zone or environment on Harbor Drive. I think that's a great idea. I support that idea. But at the same time, they talk about creating a cruise ship terminal, creating a home port for maybe 5 ships. Well, just take 5, 5 ships home ported at the B Street Pier. That's like discharging 5,000 people, maybe in every 1 or 2 week interval. Cruise ships require service. You've got to bring food aboard, passengers have got to come aboard. In other cities, cruise ship terminals are in industrial areas. And so what I'm concerned with is when we say Harbor Drive is going to be a pedestrian, yeah, but now we're going to have a cruise ship terminal, and we're going to support that cruise ship terminal with the infrastructure that is needed to service it. I think that something is going to give there, and I'm afraid that would be the pedestrians. And so I would prefer to see the cruise ship terminal facilities located elsewhere. I feel that that pier, however, could be a ceremonial pier. I mean, the cruise ships could come in there, but they go elsewhere for service.
I'm very excited about the North Embarcadero Visionary Plan, to be able to take my family and walk along the water. We want to build it for us. The tourists are going to come. We have got to build our downtown for us, we who live there. And that's one of the keys to the growth of downtown. There's a beat that's going on in downtown that's similar to the beat of other downtowns across the country, and people in our region don't know that yet. I think with some communities and with some people who live in the region, and even in the city of San Diego, that there is a perception that maybe it's not clean, that it's not safe. We have a homeless problem. We're trying to deal with that problem. And so a lot of it has to do with really the marketing, how we tell the story of downtown, how we tell the story of really the fun and the excitement and the business of what's going on.
The Downtown Partnership, which began as San Diegans Inc., is one of the many groups to welcome the new HOT team. This is the Homeless Outreach Team, a unit of the San Diego Police Department. The team operates out of a storefront south of Horton Plaza.
We have kind of a dual #1 priorities. One is families. Anytime we find any family on the street, that's our top priority. But the second is the hardcore, we call them the hardcore homeless. The individuals that nobody else really want to deal with, the, lay on the sidewalk, defecate, urinate on yourself, drink yourself into oblivion type individual. The one that's almost a public nuisance type of thing. Usually homelessness, you have either an alcohol or some type of mental instability, and a lot of them you have both. You have an alcohol and a mental problems, and they kind of mask each other. So we tried to formulate a team where we could address those problems with, obviously police presence. You're there to enforce laws and protect people. But then once we find out that they're not, actively violating any law, we can turn around and have either the social services or the PERT get involved and maybe try to address their other issues.
The PERT is the Psychiatric Emergency Response Team, staffed here by Lynn McRae.
I perform a psychiatric evaluation, meaning the one thing I'm looking for is whether they're exhibiting any symptoms, whether or not they might need a hospitalization, or whether or not they might need a detox procedure or a rehab, or whether they just need shelter or board and care.
Basically, we'll just go out in the field and we'll contact individuals that we know are homeless. Victor and I have both worked down here for over 5 years each, so we know a lot of the homeless population to start. We'll contact them. Most of them know us already from working down here so long. We'll generally build a rapport. We'll find out if they want help. A big part of our team is that the homeless person has to want the help. We can't really force it upon them. They got to be willing to accept our help.
Have you had a history at County Mental Health?
Oh, I was there once for depression,
Yeah, you weren't there too long ago. I saw you up there.
Yeah.
So you don't take any medication now for depression?
No, I don't. You can't drink and take drugs. It just doesn't work.
That's very true. Okay. Have you ever been motivated to quit drinking?
Huh?
have you ever wanted to quit drinking?
Oh, yeah, I did. I quit drinking altogether for a year.
Okay.
Just lost interest in it. I don't know. I'm at a point now where I've concluded I can't stop. I just can't stop. But I'm not drinking any hard stuff. It's vodka, you know.
Just vodka?
Vodka or
beer?
You know, I'm not drinking whiskey or anything.
Would you be interested in getting into a detox program? Would you stay if we got you in one?
What it would be then is a detox program.
Yeah.
Okay. You'd be there, and then hopefully they'd extend you into the 10-day program at the VOA, and then after that they'd put you in a longer-term type facility.
Okay. All right.
This man agreed to accept the help, but when it came time to leave, he changed his mind, and the hot team moved on. This is the corner of B Street in Kettner, the proposed site for a new downtown main library. San Diego architect Rob Quigley was chosen with much fanfare to design this project in 1996, and his team came up with the concept of an 8-story building topped by a lattice dome. The initial public response was positive, but the city council balked at the price tag, and that put the library in limbo.
Once again, the city just loves to get controversial over public art, and I suppose that then stretches into architecture. So we have Mr. Quigley, who's a very innovative, and I think probably wouldn't be opposed to the title of whimsical. When you have whimsical architecture, you begin to have controversy. And then, of course, unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, people fixed on a $60 million building. Then as the building evolved into over $100 million, there was some real concerns about the dollar amount on this. And was Mr. Quigley the right architect? Did we really need this kind of a architectural statement in our city, or could we get away with something that was much less expensive? I think then people tend to start comparing apples and oranges. They think, well, you can build one next door to the present library for $60 million, but up here it'd be $100 million. I think we all know that just is nonsense. You're going to use the same developers, the same supplies are going to cost as much. The land is pretty much the same price. You're obviously talking about two different qualities. And if San Diego wants a warehouse for a library that we can just simply go and get the books and out, then that's one thing. If they want something that they really can be proud of, and that when people come into the Bay and they come towards our front door, the North Embarcadero, and they see a library that we're all real proud that we built, and that's one that's enjoyable, then of course those cost a little bit more.
City officials are now considering alternative proposals. Building downtown is rarely without conflict, even in the private sector. Take the case of the El Cortez Hotel. Plans to renovate this San Diego landmark have circulated for 20 years, the latest being a conversion to luxury apartments. But a glitch in the financing has stalled this round. And then there's the San Diego Tower. The developers want to build an icon for the city, a 500-foot sky tower, complete with a revolving restaurant, a sushi bar, a corporate showcase, and a simulated air traffic control room with audio from Lindbergh Field. At the base would be restaurants, retail, and entertainment. The only thing missing from this plan is the site. They were denied a spot on the North Embarcadero and are now vying for a location near the ballpark. The plethora of projects gives the impression that downtown is boomtown, and some are concerned about who's keeping track of the big picture.
Nature has given us the greatest resources, that any city could possibly have. We have the greatest weather, we're right on the water. It's just a wonderful opportunity, and we just don't seem to have ever had the kind of ability to use that to build a quality city. Maybe it's the mañana attitude that we are able to take it so easy because we have it so easy that we don't really have to worry and plan. We've got 1 million people coming, whether it's 20 years or 30 years. That's going to be a lot of congestion. We don't do good planning. We have a no-growth attitude, which just simply doesn't work. You can't stop people from coming. What you need to do is you need to negotiate with the developers. You need to make them understand why putting housing where you want it to be is where we should put it. You need to work with our politicians at the state level to make sure we get our fair share. We send far more taxes up to Sacramento than we get back. We need to make sure that we get that kind of business down here.
Planning needs to involve a very wide constituency. I think we really need to take the time, and it's a laborious process, but to go out and educate the citizens as to the benefits. And oftentimes we've rushed forward, we've floated ideas, and we haven't done the groundwork in advance to make sure whether they're real or illusory. And as a result, a lot of times the population gets very skeptical because they see things coming forward that never happen. I think government really needs to move to build a credibility with its citizens and to involve them. And then I guess the other aspect I see that sometimes is forgotten is that we shouldn't try and accomplish everything during one politician's career. Things that are worth doing right really need a much longer term perspective.
The one thing that bugs me about the constant statement by many people within this community that we need to develop a vision or we have no vision, that isn't true. We have numerous visions. They're well articulated and stated. There are in the general plan of the city, they're in all of the community plans, they're in temporary paradise.
Temporary Paradise is the classic report on San Diego written by urban planners Kevin Lynch and Donald Appleyard in 1974. Among the principles they stressed, plan for growth by increasing density around major centers, provide mass transit, and protect the natural amenities, especially the waterfront.
You know, that vision exists. What does not exist is commitment to the vision, even though those visions are adopted by legislative bodies throughout this entire region. What does not exist is the commitment and the leadership and the money, the bucks, together with a schedule to follow through on these visionary elements of the general plan or a temporary paradise. There isn't a schedule, you know, which is attached to dollars, which is prioritized, which says we do this, followed by this, and this is the time sequence in which we accomplish these objectives.
I think San Diego has the opportunity to build itself into the most important corner of the continental United States. We can't claim that title today. I would have to admit that the Seattle region and the Miami region, as far as corners are concerned, are more important. But if you think of our future, and in particular our relationship to the Pacific Rim and NAFTA, Latin America, we are an ideal outlet and conduit to those areas, plus the general growth that we're having from all other sources in San Diego.
The people here sometimes are a little too close to realize the tremendous advantages we have. And we really need to back off a little bit and move forward with a city that I think, as it's emerging now, will be a major tourist draw forever, will be a wonderful place to live, will be home to a U.S. Navy we're very proud of, and hopefully will become a capital for biotechnology and technology companies in the future.
And Dennis Cruzan would like to see those companies downtown.
What's happening downtown is you've got a lot of city, younger, urban dwellers who make up a big portion of your high technology workforce. And when you layer that in with a very strong demography that's going around downtown with strong transportation system, with reasonably affordable living situations, you set up an interesting possibility that technology companies truly will come downtown and flourish and be part of the downtown fabric, in addition to the entertainment and the residential and hotel.
That's what we want. We want a place that hums 7/24, a place that's fun, a place that people can work. They can get out of their cars, they can jump on the trolley from the ballpark to North Embarcadero and have a really wonderful lifestyle.
Where the leadership will come from to implement this vision, or who will articulate the vision, maybe that's another question. You know, I believe that the vision should be articulated by planners, by city government. Desirably, city government should be the leader in the implementation of vision, or individuals. The Padres, you know, can implement a portion of the vision, or other individual sites. Ernest Hahn was a visionary and an implementer. But both of those entities, the Padres and Horton Plaza, they need to subordinate their special interest projects to the macro vision that somebody needs to have in their head as the city moves forward into the next millennium.
Blight, shame, vision, leadership, risk, catalyst, redevelopment, life. This is the language of a city reborn. A city built on dreams of those who claim it as their own. Some dreams will live, others will die. all signs of a vibrant downtown, a city with a beating heart. I'm Shannon Bradley. Thank you and good night.
Funding for Path to Paradise is provided in part by the Burnham Foundation and by Public Financial Management Incorporated and Solomon Smith Barney. UCSD TV has joined with Citizens Coordinate for Century 3, the region's oldest nonpartisan civic organization, to produce Path to Paradise as a way to start a conversation about the future of our region. If you would like more information about C3, please call 619-232-7196